Hi everyone, welcome to another Flex Physiotherapy video. We're doing a how-to splinting video again, and today we're talking about splinting options for trigger finger or trigger thumb. There's another video which you can have a look at which describes how to make a static PIP joint immobilizing splint, which is quite a helpful splint for someone with quite severe triggering, either for a PIP joint or for a thumb IP joint. But quite often, complete immobilization is a bit unnecessary. If a person can move through quite a large range of motion before they feel any discomfort, any clicking, any catching, any non-triggering, non-painful movement is good movement and maintains joint health. And so in that situation, what we want to be able to do is to make a splint that restricts the risky movement while allowing the safe range of movement. So a short arc motion splint of some kind. So let's use a thumb as an example. We have a patient here who has a trigger thumb, and we are going to discover that this patient can flex to about 40 to 45 degrees, and then the triggering catches and locks down here. And so we know that they've got partial range of motion that is safe and some range of motion that is risky and needs to be avoided. So we're going to make a splint around the proximal phalanx, which has an extension underneath the distal phalanx to restrict flexion while still allowing extension, and not coming too far towards the tip so that they've still got pinch and grasp capacity. So let's pick a colour, do a nice green splint today. So we're going to start with a piece of plastic that is going from the MCP joint to about halfway along the distal phalanx, approximately that much length. How wide does it need to be? Well, as long as it can go circumferentially around the thumb, that's great. I'm going to now shape it because we don't want it to be, if we did that, that would be fully immobilizing around the PIP joint. But we only want the full circumference to be around the proximal phalanx. So roughly halfway up here, I'm going to trim off some plastic. Like so, and I'm going to mirror that on the other side. It's nice to have these holes in lines. You can use them to make sure you're lining it up. Okay, so that's the basic idea of our splint. It's going to wrap around the thumb like this, with this paddle or piece sticking out underneath on the palm side. But as I said, I don't want it to go all the way to the tip. It's going to be very awkward for the patient, going to get in their way, and it's just unnecessary. As long as it's long enough to restrict their movement, then that's long enough for me. There's no point being more annoying than you need to be with your splinting. Okay, so that is the splint we're going to make. We drop that into our hot water. Just getting a little bit carried away here. Better to keep it closer to 75 degrees rather than 100 degrees, which it seems to be sitting at the moment. That should heat up nice and quickly. Okay, thumb again please, patient. Thank you. So we're going to place this underneath the proximal phalanx and wrap it around the proximal phalanx. I want to pinch it, not on the dorsum, but a little bit more on the radial side. So the strap is out of the way, it doesn't get in the way of the index finger. Now, I really want to make sure that this thumb is held in a slightly bent position, which is not going far enough to run the risk of triggering. So if they trigger at 45 degrees, then make sure they've got at least 30 degrees of flexion, but don't run that line too closely, otherwise you'll be adjusting the splint or the patient will be coming back saying the splint wasn't effective and they're still getting triggering episodes. Our goal here is to completely eliminate the ongoing triggering episodes to try and give the body a chance to settle down that cycle of irritation and hyperproliferative thickening that's going on around the A1 pulley. And so that is a safe range of motion for our patient. You can always test it if necessary. You can just dip the little end piece, the distal paddle, back in the water and adjust the angle. But that is the basic shape of your splint. If it slides off, that's easy. Sometimes you need to wait for it to be cool enough so you can pop it apart. Trim off the unnecessary plastic where it's been pinched. Round off the corners. I'm going to trim off a little bit of excess that I have at the proximal edge here. And round it off for comfort. Like so. All my edges, and all my corners I should say, nicely rounded. Now my edges, I also want to round off and smooth off. This proximal edge is going to be close to the MCP joint. There's going to be a fair bit of movement and a potential for irritation there. So I will dip that in the water. And just gently press that back on itself. Roll it back to a nice smooth and comfortable finish for the patient. Now, you might want to round off this edge here as well that sits just over the dorsum of the IP joint, but I'm not going to be able to dip that in the water without dipping more plastic than I want in the water. So I might use the heat gun just to get that little edge there. So there is my splint, ready except for adding a Velcro strap and doing my final smoothing off with the heat gun. Okay, I'm ready to finish off my short arc motion splint for trigger thumb. I just need 2 little pieces of hook tape. It's probably a slightly wider piece than 50% of the width of my strap, so I might use 2 little pieces with a couple of extra bits that can get tossed out. Okay. There we go, there's my 2 bits. I'm going to scratch up my plastic to make sure that the Velcro sticks well. Just roughen up that smooth surface. Now fire up my heat gun. Feel for any edges that are sharp or rough. And just smooth or press them down. This dorsal distal edge here near the IP joint can be gently rounded off as well for comfort. Okay. Add a bit of heat, just enough to activate the adhesive without softening the plastic. Repeat for the strap on the palmar side, like so. And I just want to finish that off with a little reinforcing strip to make sure the Velcro stays where I have put it. Heat up just enough plastic to cover the edge with a little press and stretch and stick. Press it in nice and firmly to secure it. Final check, that feels great. Okay, now I just need a little loop strip of that length. Again, probably slightly more than 50% of the width, depending on the size of the thumb you're treating. Okay, let's have a look at this in the patient's thumb. Sitting around the proximal phalanx with the IP joint free to move within the restricted short arc of movement that you've selected, with this angle adjusted to suit the individual patient. Tight enough so that it doesn't slip around or slip off, but not so tight that it creates a tourniquet on the patient's thumb. Get the patient to adjust the tension until they're happy with it, and then trim off the excess length, like so. How does that feel? There we go. That's how you make a short arc motion splint. As I said, there is another video demonstrating how to make an immobilizing splint if you think that the patient isn't quite ready for this yet. This is quite a nice splint for someone in conjunction with a cortisone injection that may also be used for helping to settle down the trigger finger or the trigger thumb. Enjoy making it yourself, have a play, try it out. If you have any questions, any thoughts, any tips or tricks that you've learnt yourself, please put them in the comments below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Cheers.